Okay, today we're learning Shabbat Daf Gimel. Today's shiur is dedicated in memory of my grandmother, Helen Cohen, Hannah Bat Yitzchak Nechemia Zichrona Levracha, by my parents, Robert and Paula Cohen. We're going to start at the Mishnah at the bottom of Tzadi Bet Amud Bet. That's where I finished in the previous class. So we're about 10 or 12 lines from the bottom. Hamotzi kikar l'reshut harabim chayav, hotziuhu shnayim pturim. If one person takes a loaf of bread out into the public domain, he's obligated, but now that's obvious. We don't need the Mishnah to tell us that. The reason the Mishnah tells us this is to compare it to the next case, which is Hotziuhu Shnayim Pturim. And this is something that comes up a lot, which is if two people do an act together, and we're going to see if it's an act that could have been done by one person, then they're exempt. Lo yachol echad lahotzio, v'hotziuhu shnayim chayavim. But what if it was something very large? Let's say they carried out a couch, and a couch can't be carried out by one person by themselves. So therefore, in that case, they'll actually be obligated. Rabbi Shimon potel. But even in this case, Rabbi Shimon exempts, and we're going to see in the Gemara why Rabbi Shimon exempts. It seems like there's two opinions in this Mishnah. We're going to learn from the Gemara there's actually three opinions about this topic, okay, about when we exempt in a case where two people are doing the same action together. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, v'amar la Amar Abaye, v'amar la b'manita Tana. Three options. Either Rav said that, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Abaye said it, or maybe even this appeared in the Braita. Tana. B'manita Tana, or it appeared in the Braita. Ze yachol v'ze yachol. We're going to have different options. Either both people could have done it themselves. Rabbi Meir Mechayev, here we have an opinion that even if both people could have done it themselves, then Rabbi Meir says, you're chayav. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon potrim. Okay, if each person could have done it by themselves, normally we say, now what's the idea here? According to Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, they're easier to understand. If each person could have done it themselves, we basically view each person as not having done a full act, because each person is only kind of doing part, and they could have really done the whole thing themselves. Therefore, we view it as a partial action. So that's one possibility. That's Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon who say you're basically exempt because you didn't really do something, a whole act, because you did it with someone else. But Rabbi Meir, in any case, thinks you're obligated. Okay, two people doing an act together, even if each could have done it by themselves, it doesn't matter. They each did something that was forbidden on Shabbat, even though they did it together, that doesn't matter. They're still obligated. We still don't really have the logic behind it. We're not actually going to really have the logic behind it in the Gemara, but the Gemara is going to bring us the proof texts that each of them bring. Ze'ino yachol v'ze'ino yachol. Second option. It's a case where neither of them, so possibility number one is they each could have done it themselves. Again, we have Rabbi Meir, who didn't appear in our Mishnah, who thinks they're obligated anyway. We have Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. It's interesting. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon often argue in Masechet Shabbat, right? We have all these cases they argue. But in this case, we're going to see that they agree at least about one issue here, which is if both of them could have done it themselves and they do it together, they're exempt. Again, you're exempt by Torah law. Now we have the second option. Ze'ino yachol v'ze'ino yachol, like the couch. Can't carry it by yourselves. So Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir mechayvim. Now Rabbi Yehuda moves over to Rabbi Meir's side on this one and says, oh, you're chayav. But Rabbi Shimon still exempts. He thinks any two people doing something together, a malacha, are not going to be obligated. Even if it's the kind of act that requires two people, you're still not, in order to be chayav on Shabbat, it's very interesting. He thinks you need to be an individual doing the act, right? One by yourself. Ze yachol v'ze eino yachol. What if one can do it and the other one can't do it? Okay, so one would be capable. It's something, right? You have a really strong person. They could carry it by themselves, but he ends up carrying it with a weaker person who can't carry it by themselves. So divrei kol chayav. So everyone agrees in this case that you'd be chayav. Now, who is chayav? We don't know. We're going to have to get to that in the Gemara. Which is the one who's obligated? Tanya nami hachi. So now we're going to bring a braita that says the exact same thing. Now, if this was said before by Emoraim, either Abaye or Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, it makes sense that the Gemara is now bringing a braita to support. By the way, I didn't mention, but I have a sheet today which will help you with the organization of the different opinions. So now he says like this. the Braita says, Hamotzi kikar l'reshut harabim chayav. This is going to be similar to our Mishnah, but it's going to add in Rabbi Meir's opinion, and it's going to organize them a little bit differently than they were organized in the previous source that we just saw. So, but it's the same exact idea, and that's why Tanya Namihachi is basically saying, well, here's a Braita that says exactly the same thing. It's just a little organized differently. Hamotzi kikar l'reshut harabim chayav. So if you take this loaf of bread out to the public domain, you're chayav. Hotziu shnayim. If two people did it together, Rabbi Meir mechayev. Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so now we're going to have it like this. Rabbi Meir says you're obligated. Here, notice they didn't give any details. Can you, can't you? Because Rabbi Meir, and this is why I said it's organized a little differently, they're basically coming to tell you, Rabbi Meir thinks in all cases you're going to be obligated. It doesn't matter, even if you did it together with somebody else. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, and here comes Rabbi Yehuda, and he's going to start giving you, it depends. If one can't take it out by himself, and, right, if either one of them couldn't have carried it by themselves, and hotziu shnayim, then chayavim. But im lav, if, right, they couldn't, then ptulim, meaning if they couldn't have done it by themselves, then they'll be exempt. Okay, so if they needed both people to carry it, like the big couch, then they'd obviously be obligated, because how else are you going to carry out that couch? You did it the exact way you would have done it normally. Who cares that you did it with two people? But if they could have each done it themselves and they did it with someone else, then again, there's something lacking in the action because you're not doing a full action. The Rabbi Shimon poter, and again, we have Rabbi Shimon at the end coming and says, I don't care how you did it, you're always going to be exempt. So, Menahane Mile, what's our source? The Tanu Rabbanan, and like I said, this isn't going to exactly explain the logic, but what it is going to do is it's going to explain where they found this in the Pesukim, in the verses in the Torah. So they're going to start with this pasuk in Dvarim. I'll read the whole pasuk first. It's in Dvarim Vayikra. My mistake. It's in Vayikra, chapter 4, pasuk 27. Im nefesh echad techta b'shkaga. It's one of the main sources for korban chata. This is what we keep talking about. When we talk about your chayav or patur, well, we're not talking about are you going to get skila for it. We're talking about if you did it unwittingly, would you have to bring a sacrifice? So we take this pasuk that talks about the sacrifices, and it says, if one individual, notice it starts off with nefesh echad, one individual, techta, would sin, bishgaga, unwittingly, mea ma'aretz, from among the people, be'asota, if he does achat mitzvot Hashem asher lo te'asena v'Hashem. He does one of the mitzvot that you're not supposed to do and is guilty. So we start off with the word ba'asota. B'nane mile, detano rabanan, be'asota. Here's the Braita. The Braita starts off with the word ba'asota, if he does it. So now they say, what's important here? The doing, the action of doing the malacha. So we say here, ha'oseh et kula v'lo ha'oseh miktzata. Focus here. Now, interesting. You could focus on the individual. You could look at it in one way, as the individual didn't put all of the individual's efforts into that malacha, because could have shared it with somebody else, right? Could have done it with someone else. And therefore, right, if you want to talk about the case where either one could have done it themselves, so he doesn't expend his full energy. That's one way of looking at it. But this seems to focus on, he didn't do the full act because he only did half an act. If I could carry something by myself and I carry it with someone else, I'm only doing half an act. So I don't have ba'asota. I only did half the maaseh and not the whole thing. Ketzad. So now they're going to say, how does this work? What would be the case? Shnayim shayu chazim b'malgez v'logzim. Two people are carrying a huge pitchfork, and they use it to gather the bundles, or big karkar v'shoftim, or the piece of the loom where they string the string through. B'kulmus v'kotvim, with a quill, and they write. B'kanet, a reed or something like that, and they bring it out to Reshut Harabim. These are all actions that the individual could have done on their own. Yachol yihu chayavim, you might have thought they're obligated. Talmud lomar ba'asota, ha'oseh kula v'lo ha'oseh miktzata. So these are all examples where the individual could have done it on their own, and they did it with someone. They're missing. They didn't do the full act because they did only half an act. Be'igul shel dvela. This was a dish they made. It was a fig cake. They would take figs, press them, and then they would press them together, and they're sticky, right, dried figs, and they would stick together and they make a cake out of it. Now, either you would have to say it's a very heavy item, right? Imagine a lot of figs. Eventually, it becomes very heavy. Or maybe one other way I thought about it was that maybe it's just bulky, and if you try to carry something like that, it's very fragile. Maybe fragile would be the better word, where you try to balance that one person in their hands, the whole thing could kind of fall apart. So maybe you need two people to balance it properly. So for whatever reason, carrying out this igul of tvela, is this fig cake, is an action done by two people. You would need two people. And then you took it out to Rashut HaRabim, or a korah, or a big beam, right? A big beam, generally, you would need one person to carry the front, one person to carry the end. Again, here comes Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Im lo yachol echad lotzia. We're having a lot of repetition because they're going to get to the source for this, but they're basically telling over the opinions. So Rabbi Yehuda, remember, who has the in-between opinion. Im lo yachol echad lotzio. If it's the kind of igul of tvela, or the beam that couldn't be carried by one person, votziu shnayim chayavim. Then they're actually going to be obligated, because each one actually did a whole act, because without each person, you would never be able to get this outside. Vim lav pturim, but if not, they're exempt. Rabbi Shimon Omer, af al pi shelo yachol echad lotzio votziu shnayim pturim. Lekach ne'amar ba'asota. So he actually says you're going to be exempt also. Why? He says that's why it says ba'asota, to teach you. Yachid she'asa'ah chayav, shnayim she'asuah pturim. He views ba'asota as when you do the action yourself. If you do it with someone, you're always going to be exempt. So now they're going to say, what's really the root of their machloket? Because both of them really learn from the word ba'asota. Ba'asota means either you have to do a full action, and Rabbi Yehuda says you didn't do a full action if you shared it with someone, unless you couldn't have done it by yourself. Rabbi Shimon says ba'asota is you yourself, not with anybody else. So comes the Gemara and brings up the following, explains this is really the root of their machloket. That they're really debating more than what we see in that one word. B'haikra, okay, they interpret this pasuk differently. We're now going to focus on the beginning part of the verse. Rabbi Shimon savar tlata mi'ut aktivi. Rabbi Shimon says, notice this verse has three things that focus, three words here that focus on the individual. What do we have? Nefesh, a soul. Now, if you didn't have the word achat, you still would have known nefesh is singular. The second one is achat. Achat is one and not two. Ba'asota is if you do the action. It's also one person. So he comes and he says, Chad lemi'ute, so nefesh techta, echad techta, ba'asota techta. Now the word techta only appears once in the verse, but they basically say the verb techta refers to number one, right, which means to sin. Number one, the person, the nefesh, one. Number two, echat, one person. Number three, ba'asota, as that person does his action. So, chad lemi'ute ze oker v'ze miniach. The first one it comes to exempt, which even Rabbi Meir is going to agree with, is if there's an action that has two parts. For example, we've talked about this both in the very beginning of the Masechet and just the other day. When you carry, there's two parts of carrying. One is uprooting it from the current domain, and the second is placing it in the new domain. So let's say one person did the akira, the uprooting, and the second person did the hanacha, the placing down, which is exactly the case in the first Mishnah. The balabayit hotzi et yado, and the ani, the poor person, accepted it. So in that case, obviously, if two people do it, you're going to be exempt. That everybody agrees with, because each person has fully done only half an action here, right? There's no debate about that. You can't view it in any other way. So the first one, nefesh, is to exclude ze oker v'ze miniach. The second is to exclude the case of if each of them could have done it by themselves, then doing it together would mean that they're not going to be obligated, because they each could have done it themselves and they did it with someone, so they're lacking something in the action here. And the third is to exclude ze'ino yachol v'ze'ino yachol. So Rabbi Shimon says this is why he exempts even in the case of the couch, where two people can't carry it by themselves and they carry it together. You're still going to be exempt, because the pasuk is so clearly talking about an individual. An individual brings a korban chatat for something an individual does, not for something done with somebody else. And this is interesting, because in law, if somebody helps you with a crime, that person is obligated. Here we're basically saying someone who helps with a crime is not obligated. Okay, and not only that, but almost if two people do anything together, they're basically going to be exempt. Okay, which is fascinating, right? It's very hard to understand his logic, because just because you do it with someone, if you needed someone to do that action, why would we actually exempt you? And again, maybe this goes back to Rabbi Shimon in general about Melechet Machshevet. Maybe he views Melechet Machshevet as a creative act that one person does on their own, right? Especially if we try to say that creative act, it's kind of like being in place of God. It would be an act that one can do by themselves. So that's one extreme. The Rabbi Yehuda, what's interesting in this source, we're only going to have, just like in our Mishnah, we only had two opinions. We didn't have Rabbi Meir. Also here, we're not going to have Rabbi Meir in terms of the source. We're going to have just Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, or maybe I'm wrong. Oh, no, sorry. We are going to have Rabbi Meir here. There's another source we're only going to have Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. This source does have Rabbi Meir, my mistake. Anyway, let's go to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, Chad Lemiute. Again, he views there's three exemptions here. There's three nefesh, echad, and ba'asotah. But he does something different with them. The first two are going to be the same. Ze oker v'ze miniach. If it's half an action, really, then you're going to be exempt, because you didn't actually do anything wrong. If you just do akira, you're not obligated. If you just do hanacha, placing it down, you're not obligated. So therefore, you're not going to be obligated. If it's something you both could have done together, and you did it, you both could have done it, by yourselves, and you did it together, you're going to be exempt. Bechad, what does he do with the last one? Lemiute, here he's going to say it's coming to exclude something else. This doesn't have to do with our topic. It has to do with the topic of the pasuk, which is about bringing a korban chatat, which you generally bring if you did a sin unwittingly. What does it come to exclude? Yachid she'asa'a b'hora'at beitin. This is a whole topic that's discussed in Masechet Horayot, which is a very, very small Masechet, which basically discusses the issue of if the beitin makes a mistake and they teach something wrong and the people follow the court and all the people or the majority of the people make a mistake, what do they have to do? They have to bring what we call a par ha'elem davar shel tzibur. It's a special bull offering that you have to bring if the majority of the community follows a mistaken law of the Beit Din. Now, what if the court issues a ruling, but the majority of the people don't follow the court? So the question becomes, and there's a debate about this in Masechet Horayot, if you as an individual follow the court, do you have to bring a korban chatat? You obviously don't bring a par ha'elem davar shel tzibur, because that's a communal offering that only if the majority of the people do. But would you have to bring your own korban chatat? Or do we view you as what we call anus? You were totally blameless. You followed what the Beit Din said, the Sanhedrin. They're the main deciders of law. Who are you? You're just an individual who followed what they do. So comes Rabbi Yehuda and he says that third ba'asotah, right, the third unique individual in this thing comes to say, if an individual does what the Beit Din taught them, then they're exempt because they're onus, okay? It's only when the whole community does it, or the majority, then they have to bring a special sacrifice. But the regular korban chatat doesn't apply. To Rabbi Shimon, what do we do with Rabbi Shimon? Rabbi Shimon would say, now this is a very fascinating line, I'll explain to you why in a minute. Yachid shasa'a b'hora'at beit din chayav. He holds an individual that does, like the court said, would actually be obligated. And that's why his third mi'ut is for ze'eno yachol v'ze'eno yachol. For the couch case, he comes to say you're exempt. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't think you're exempt for the couch case, so he uses this exemption for something else. Now, why is this fascinating? Because Rashi explains, okay, and this isn't yet so fascinating. Rashi says, but you'll see after why Rashi is fascinating. Rashi says here the reason why is because Rabbi Shimon goes according to his opinion, as it says in Masechet Horayot, that a yachid that does what the Beit Din says is going to be obligated. I mentioned there was a machloket there. He says Rabbi Shimon holds like he does there. And very simple, that sounds very, okay. But if you look in Tosfot, Tosfot says, Hachi Garsina, and it's a big Hey Gimel, the third Tosfot on the page, says, this is not the right text that you have in front of you. The way you should read it is like this. The Rabbi Shimon, Yachid she'asa'a b'hora'at beit din, lo tzarich ka. That means you don't even need a pasuk. Obviously, he's exempt, which comes out to the exact opposite of what they said. Now, why does Tosfot say this? He says, and we don't say like Rashi says, that Rabbi Shimon goes according to what he says in Horayot that you're obligated. Why? Because it says explicitly in Horayot, not what Rashi says. It says, halach v'asal pihen. If you follow the court, now this is actually a bit of a different case, but it says there that if, let's say, the court rules that it's okay to eat, okay, I'll just give it an extreme example, but that, the following ham is not made from pig and it's kosher. Okay, there's some sort of type of ham not made from pig and it's kosher, or some sort of meat, they say it's kosher. Anyway, it turns out they made a mistake. They go back and they say to the people, listen, we made a mistake, and the people all sinned and they ate the meat, but then, and they, whether they bring a korban or they didn't bring a korban, it doesn't really matter. The court then says we made a mistake. It's not kosher. Now, you as an individual didn't hear the new court ruling. This is classic. You have in a newspaper, they make a mistake and then they correction, in little teeny print, right? Front story page, big mistake, and then little teeny correction in page 12 a few days later. Nobody sees it. Nobody realizes there was a mistake. So this individual missed it. They didn't see the correction and they went ahead and did it. So it says in the Mishnah there, whether or not the people did the Par Helim Davar Shel Tzibur or not, right? Rabbi Shimon poter. Rabbi Shimon exempts that individual. And then why? Because he was toled bebeitin anus. Okay, that's what they say, he was anus. Now that's not exactly the same case, but Tosfot says if Rabbi Shimon says you're exempt there, he's obviously going to think you're exempt in this case. And therefore, they just say Rabbi Shimon doesn't need to learn it from this pasuk because it's just something that's totally obvious. Now Rashi says that Rabbi Shimon in Horayot actually says you're obligated. Now I looked to find where Rashi says in Horayot that Rabbi Shimon said you're obligated, and it was hard to find. There's actually a machloket there, but it's not so clear it's Rabbi Shimon. Basically, what I wanted to point out here is when people write things and you think, oh, if I see it in print, it must be obviously the case. Here you see that there's a bit of a debate about how to understand Rabbi Shimon, and Tosfot views it one way, Rashi reads it a different way, and it's not so clear cut. So it's always important to open the sources yourself and see them, because if you just looked at Rashi, you'd assume it's obvious that Rabbi Shimon says chayav, and when you see Tosfot, you see it's not so obvious, and maybe really Rabbi Shimon is exempt in this case. So it's just an interesting case of what really happened there, and it's fascinating. They both, again, it all depends on interpretation. So they each have different interpretations of how they understand the sugyot and Horayot. Hopefully you'll remember this when we get in a few years to Horayot and we learn it inside. Okay, moving on. So again, what do we have set up here? 3 miutim, nefesh echat be'asota. Each learned 3 things. Rabbi Shimon learns his exemption for our case. In Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we learn the exemption. The third one is not coming for what Rabbi Shimon says. It's coming for this yachid she'asa b'hora peitim, for something else. Rabbi Meir comes and disagrees with the whole concept that there's 3 miutim in this pasuk, that there's 3 exemptions. Miktiv nefesh techta, echat techta, basotah techta. Notice the verb techta doesn't appear twice or 3 times. It doesn't say nefesh techta, echat techta, basotah techta. It doesn't say that. It says in nefesh echad techta b'shgaga. Nefesh echad he uses 1, basotah he uses 2. So he gets to only 2 exemptions. So therefore he says, Tre miute ktive. There's only 2 exemptions. Chad miute zeh oker b'zeh miniach. I told you before, everybody agrees with that. That if one person does the uprooting and the other person does the putting down, you're going to be exempt. And the second is for what Rabbi Yehuda said, which has nothing to do with our topic, and that's how Rabbi Meir doesn't have any other exemptions, and therefore thinks that everybody's always going to be obligated in our cases. Amar Mar. Now we're moving on to the next part of the Mishnah. If one person could have lifted it by themselves, strong guy from the army, they can lift these things that nobody else can lift, right? They come along, they lift this thing very easily, but instead they do it with someone who's weaker than them, who couldn't actually lift it themselves. So everyone agrees you're chayav. Heiminayu mechayev. Which one is chayav? So Amar Abchista zeh sheyachol. Obviously, the one who could have done it himself is the one who's obligated. Zeh she'eino yachol mai ka'avid. Because the person who couldn't have done it by themselves, well, they certainly didn't do a full act, whereas the one who lifted it theoretically could have done it himself. And therefore, he's the one who's obligated. So a question is asked is, what was the thinking that they even asked this question? Obviously, that's the person. So the Rashba explains very interestingly. He gives, and this might help us understand a little bit about what's going on here. The Rashba says that maybe the issue is, are you expending your full effort? If we look at it that way, the question becomes, well, the person who could lift it very easily, and lifts it with someone, theoretically, maybe that person isn't doing a full action because that person is not expending their full energy to lift this item. Whereas the person who couldn't have done it on their own actually has to put all of his or her energy into lifting that to be able to do it. And maybe that person would be the one obligated. Maybe it has to do with how much are you doing of your compared to yourself. So therefore, there was a thinking that maybe that person. In the end, the Gemara rejects that, but that's the Rashba's logic for explaining why there is even a question. So now, Amar le Rav Hamnuna, what do you mean? So 1 second. Amar Rav Chisda zeh sheyachol. The zeh she'eino yachol. If you want to say it's the one who couldn't do it, my ka'abid, what did he do? He didn't do a full act. So of course he's not obligated. So Amar le Rav Hamnuna, what do you mean he didn't do a whole act? Tikam esayeh b'hadeh. Here we get to the whole issue of helping someone do a crime. In the end, he helped. Helping should be considered something. And here we're going to see. Gemara is now going to say, Amar le Rav Chisda answers him, Misayeh ein bo mamash. This is fascinating. This is what I said before. Generally, we do say collaborators are responsible. But here he basically says, Misayeh ein bo mamash. Someone who helps is not considered anything. And therefore, it's clear it's only the person who could have done it by themselves. So now, we're going to bring 4 proof texts as to how we know that Misayeh ein bo mamash. Amar Rav Zvi mishmei derava. Af ana nami tanina. They're now going to bring 4 totally different cases. And it's interesting because we always say that Shabbat has these unique laws about melechet machshevet, but here they don't seem bothered by bringing other topics as if everything's the same. Now we're going to talk about a zav. If you remember a zav, there's tumat midras or moshav, which means the zav sits on something. The item that the zav sits on, or a yoledet or a nida, any of those people, a zav is someone who has a discharge, a nida, a woman with menstrual bleeding, or a zava, not in the time of a regular cycle, she's bleeding. Anyway, in these cases, they sit on something, that item becomes tameh, and anything under the item also would become tameh. So here's a case where haya yoshev, it's a Mishnah in Zavim, haya yoshev al gabei hamita, sitting on a bed, va'arba taliot tachat raglei hamita. Each leg of the bed, there's 4 legs, each leg of the bed has a talit, a cloth underneath it, okay, or maybe a real talit, whatever it is, it's some sort of cloth underneath. Tameot, all the cloths become tameh. Why? A bed can't stand on 3 legs. 3-legged bed wouldn't work. So therefore, each one is necessary, and therefore the zav is actually putting his pressure on each of them, sitting on each of them. They're all become impure. The Rabbi Shimon mitaher. Rabbi Shimon has this opinion that they're actually pure. We're not going to deal with Rabbi Shimon. If you're riding on an animal, same kind of idea. Okay, you now have 4 taliot underneath the legs of each behema, under each leg of the animal. Tehorot, all those talitot, those pieces of material, are not impure. Why? The animal could actually stand on 3 legs. An animal can easily pick up 1 leg and have no problem standing. V'amai. So now, what would you say? Even though you don't need the leg, theoretically, though, they're all helping, and even though they're not necessary, they are helping the animal to stand. So wouldn't you say, La bishum damrina mesea ein bo mamash? This proves if you're helping, it doesn't, right now here it's just a leg, but it's the same idea. Helping isn't significant. Amar Rav Yehuda midischatia. He has a question on this. No, maybe you could say, La'olam ein malach mesea yesh bo mamash. Maybe the case is, and I'm going to put it out there, there's some different explanations of this line, but I'll explain it one way. Maybe the case is that the animal was actually really only standing on 3 legs, and the other one was up in the air. So then they say, no, but that's not a proof, because kevan de zimnin akraha v'zimnin akraha lehavi kezava mitapech. That's not a good proof, because even if the animal was standing on 1 foot, the animal often switches legs. So it could be 1 leg up, 1 leg down. It could be at different points. The animal might move the animal's leg up or down. So since the animal could move from leg to leg, or maybe did move from leg to leg, it's like the case, okay, for this I made some little diagrams on the sheet, so if you have the sheet, pays to look. Now, doesn't it say about a zava mitapech? What's a zava mitapech? It's a zav who's lying on a number of beds or benches or something like that. A zav that ends up balanced on many different benches. Okay, a zav is lying on 5 different benches, let's say. Depends how the benches are arranged and how the zav is arranged. If the zav is lying on these, or chamesh pundaot, or kan tme'in, if he's lying lengthwise, meaning the zav is in the same direction. So if you're in the same direction as the zav is lying in the exact same direction as the benches, then what are we going to say? Then tohorin. We're going to assume they're all tohorin because we don't know which one the zav is actually lying. But sorry, I made a mistake. Or kan tme'in. Then they're tameh. Okay, we're going to say the zav theoretically could have rolled from one to the other. In order for the zav to make this item impure, what has to happen? The zav has to have most of his body on the item. So if he's lying in the same direction and could have rolled from one to the other, theoretically he could have been on any of those beds and the majority of his body would have been on the bed at any given time. But if it's lirochban, if he's lying across, imagine, I'm thinking of a case when sometimes you have a sleepover and you don't have enough mattresses for your kids, so you put two mattresses together and then they sleep the other direction, right? So that's what's going on here. He sleeps in the opposite direction of, right? He's got 5 benches together and he's sleeping in the opposite direction of the way they go, perpendicular kind of. If he rolls from, right, it doesn't matter if he rolls. At every given point, the majority of his body is not on any one of the benches because he's on 5 of them. So his head is on one, his legs are on the other, his middle of his body, his torso is on the middle one. So basically, he doesn't have the majority of his body on any one of them. So then they're all going to be pure. However, Yashen, if he was asleep and he actually fell asleep, what happens in your sleep? People move around in different directions. So safek b'tapech alehem tme'im. If we're not sure he might have actually ended up on them, we actually say they're impure. Therefore, elalav mishum de'amrina mesea en bo mamash. Now, if you go back to the first case, what happened? Right? You might say here, you could say mesea en bo mamash here because all of them were somewhat supporting him. In the case of lirochban, right, where only his head was in one place, they were each acting as supporting. Nothing was fully supporting him. And you see that they don't become tameh. They don't become impure. So isn't that a proof that Mesea and Bo Mamash? That's one proof. So now we basically went through the first proof. Because in the end, they say this could really prove it. I'm going to prove it from another source, the same source actually. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Hasus metameh al yadav, hachamor al raglav. Shemshenet hasus al yadav, hachamor al raglav. A sus, the same idea. If a horse has talitot under all of its legs, only the front legs will become tameh, and for the donkey, it will be its hind legs because its horse leans on its front legs, and the donkey on its hind legs. V'amai, why would you say, why wouldn't we count all the legs? Aren't all the legs supporting? They're helping to support. So what do you see here? The fact that we don't say anything underneath them is impure shows la bishum damrina mesea and bo mamash. Doesn't that prove that mesea isn't considered significant? Amar Rav Ashi, third proof. Af ana nami tanina. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Now we're moving to a brayta. Those were 2 mishnayot from Zavim. Now we're in a brayta. Rabbi Eliezer says. Now we're talking about the Beit HaMikdash. In the Beit HaMikdash, the Kohanim had to work without any sort of separation in between their hands and the utensils. So let's say gloves, like people wear nowadays, because of Corona, that wouldn't work, right? You wouldn't be allowed to do that. Any sort of separation between your hands and the objects you're working with is a problem. Likewise, your feet, they had to be barefoot. Their feet, there couldn't be anything between their feet and the ground. But what if, raglo chata lakli, raglo chata laritzpa, we have a lot of balancing on legs today, okay, yoga kind of things, right? The animal could have balanced on 3 legs. A human, they're going to show, can balance on 1 leg, theoretically. So if 1 leg was on a utensil and 1 leg was on the floor directly, or raglo chata la'even, or 1 was on a stone, raglo chata laritzpa, ro'in, we check. Kol she'ilu yinatel la'kli v'tinatel la'even, yachol amono raglo achat. If this person has good balance, they've taken a lot of yoga classes, they know how to balance themselves on 1 foot, then avodato kshera. Then basically there's no separation between them and the floor, because if they wanted, their leg could have been in midair. So what's the difference that it was on a rock or on something else? Vimlav, if not, avodato psula. Anyway, that one doesn't, right? If they can't balance on 1 leg, then obviously it's not going to work. Vamai, ha kamaseya bahade adade. But wouldn't you say, even though they could have balanced on 1 leg, they weren't balancing on 1 leg, and that leg was providing support. So don't you see from here, la bishum damrina mesea en bo mamash? So again, we prove something that's supporting isn't considered significant. Amar Ravina, Af Ana Nami Tanina. It's interesting, by the way, that all their proofs are either from purity and impurity laws or from Beit HaMikdash. Okay, it's interesting. So now Ravina says, Af Ana Nami Tanina. Another thing about the Beit HaMikdash. All the main avodot works had to be done with the right hand, unless there was no way to do it with the right, and then you need to use your left. We're going to get into all this much later in Shas. But anyway, here it says, Kibel biyamin usmo masaya'ato. Let's say you accept the blood after you sacrifice the animal, you collect the blood in a utensil, and there's one person who's in charge of Kabbalat Adam. It's one of the main avodot, they call it, in the Mikdash. You accept the blood. So if he did it in his right hand, but he used his left hand to support the utensil, avodato kshera. Why? Wouldn't you say it's helping? And here you have the left hand being used. So 4 proofs how we know that supporting is not considered significant. Now, as I said before, it's a little bit strange because in Shabbat, you might have thought that laws are a little bit different because of Melechet Machshevet, but the Gemara doesn't seem to have an issue with that. Amar, next section, and it's going to very much match this section because, again, we're going to bring 4 proofs from other scenarios to prove what we want to prove. Rabbi Meir Mechayev. If you could do it, each person could have done it on their own. Rabbi Meir still says you're obligated. Each person is obligated, even though theoretically they only did half a maaseh. So the question was asked, shiur lezeh v'shiur lezeh. Let's say we both carry out an item together, and it's something we each could have carried on our own. But let's say it was a grogeret size of food. It was a fig-sized piece of food. Are we going to be obligated? Because theoretically, if I'm obligated and you're obligated for carrying this out together, there's only one shiur to go between the 2 of us. Maybe you need it to be 2 groats worth, like a big something. Let's say we carried out a pomegranate where it was the size of 2 figs at least, right? So do we need to have a shiur lezeh v'shiur lezeh? Or is it enough if we go by the minimum amount required for being obligated for carrying? So Rav Chisda, Rav Hamnuna debate. Each one needs to have their own shiur to be obligated. No, it's enough if there's one shiur's worth for both people. Amra Papa Mishmei de Rava. So now we're going to prove that you really only need one shiur for both. Okay, if they both took out a grogeret together, they'd be obligated anyway. How do we know this? So he's going to say, we're going to learn this also from what we just talked about in Zavim. Now remember what I told you. If a zav sits on something, you need the majority of the zav's body to be on this item. Now, what did we say about the bed? Ba'arba taliyot tachat arba raglei amita. You have 1 talit under each leg. Tmeot mipnei she'en yachol lamod al shalosh. V'amai libai shiur ziva lezeh v'shiur ziva lezeh. On each leg, you don't have the majority of the zav putting his body on. His body weight is split in 4. So no leg of this bed has the majority of the zav's weight on it. So what do you see here? It's 1 shiur of the zav can create tuma in 4 different places. Okay, 4 different talitot can become tameh under each leg of the bed. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, af ana nami tanina. He's going to bring another case. Now here it's from Shabbat. But it's still a little bit different than carrying. A deer goes into your house, and one person locks the door. He's obviously obligated for capturing the deer. If 2 people lock the door, because why? Each one didn't do a full act. But lo yachol echad linol, if it's the kind of door that needs 2 people to lock the door, chayavim. V'amai libai shiur tzedal lezeh v'shiur tzedal lezeh. Maybe you'd say there's only 1 deer between the 2 of us. Maybe you'd only be obligated if there's 2 deer in the house, and then I can be responsible. I'm responsible because I caught 1, and you're responsible because you caught 2. But you don't say that. So lav mishum damrin an shiur echad lekulam. So what do you say? This proves 1 shiur, 1 deer for both of us. Amar Ravina, 3rd proof. Af ana nami tanina. Hashutafim sheganvu v'tavchu. If we steal and then we slaughter, we steal an animal and then we slaughter it, right? If there's Tashlume kefel, double, sometimes you have to pay 4 or 5. It's a shiur or a seh. So if you slaughter and then you sell, if you steal an animal and then you slaughter it, you're chayav tashlume arba'a v'chamisha. It's a shiur or a seh. So now they say, is it not because we say shiur echad lekulam? In other words, theoretically, right? Amai libai shiur tficha lezeh v'shiur tficha lezeh. If we steal 1 animal and slaughter it together, This is exactly what we talked about, doing a crime together. We're both obligated to pay the extra payments. Each of us has to pay the double or the times 4 or times 5. So is it not because we say shiur echad lekulam? Last proof, Amar Rav Ashi af ana nami tanina, shnayim shotziu kaneshel garde, chayavim. 2 people take out the reed that they used for the weaving. They're both obligated. V'amai, libai shiur tzal lezeh v'shiur tzal lezeh. Shouldn't each person have to have their own shiur's worth of taking out? Lav mishum damrina. Now, theoretically, why is this only one shiur? Because you can only weave one thing at a time. So you can only weave one item. So wouldn't you say it's only if you could kind of weave 2 items out of it at the same time? So lav mishum damrina shiur chad lekulam. Again, proof shiur chad for both. So Amar le Rav Acha berei de Rava le Rav Ashi dilma deipe kedei levashel beitzah kala lezeh or beitzah kala lezeh. Well, this kaneh that we use for the weavers could also be used to light a fire. So theoretically, you could say, well, maybe in it there's enough to light a fire to roast 2 eggs, one for you, one for me, and that's why we're both obligated. But then they say, no, in ken l'shmina kaneh de'alma, then it should have just said a kaneh. Maishna de garde. Why does it say a kaneh specifically of weavers? Dilma deipe kedei la'arog mapa lezeh u'kedei la'arog mapa lezeh. They say, oh, well, maybe it's a long enough reed that you can actually weave 2 cloths at one time. And maybe that's what's going on here. And therefore they say in the end, ela meha leika lamashma mina. This source, okay, so we've proven it from 3 other sources, but this one you can't necessarily prove it from. Last thing for today, Tana Kamed Rav Nachman. Tana brings a bright in front before of Nachman. Shnayim shotziu kaneh shel gardi pturim, the Rabbi Shimon mechayev. Since we're already talking about this kaneh of gardi, we now bring the source that says if 2 people carry out the kaneh of the gardi pturim, Rabbi Shimon's mechayev. Apparently, it was something large, and you needed 2 people. That's why you're going to be chayav. Rabbi Shimon's mechayev. The rabbis are poter. So now, if you learn today's daf, you'll ask this question also. Kape laya. That's the exact opposite. Remember, Rabbi Shimon always exempts. The rabbis are the ones who are mechayev in this case. Ela ema, it must be a mistake. Chayavim v'Rabbi Shimon poter. It must be Rabbi Shimon exempts and not the rabbis, and they got it mixed up. Okay, we'll end here for today. We'll pick up with the next Mishnah tomorrow with our new topic about carrying and what if you carry something with something else. And we're going to get back to the topic of malacha she'eina tzricha legufa, which is always an interesting topic. And with that, we'll end for today.